Next, we're going to talk about bringing legacy brands into Web3. From digital collectibles to loyalty rewards, we're seeing more and more brands like Reddit and Starbucks making the switch into Web3. And if you're like me and wondering why so many brands are switching and which one's going to be the next big brand to switch, this is a good panel for you. For this panel, we are proud to welcome Ronin the Collector and Matt McElroy. Ronin serves as the head of partner strategy at Gig Labs and co-hosts the NFT Live show, which offers daily talks regarding NFTs and the Web3 industry as a whole. Matt is the senior director of growth and innovation at Turner Sports, where he's currently focused on blockchain-based video games and interactive, utility-driven experiences. The panel will be moderated by Elizabeth Morrison, who is the partner success lead at Unstoppable Domains and co-host of Girls Night in Web3, which works to connect the community through weekly open mic Twitter spaces. Obviously, these three all have extremely impressive resumes, so let's give a warm welcome to Ronin, Matt, and Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the main stage. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. I want to give a big shout out. Let's give a round of applause to the Web3 ATL team. This team has been absolutely incredible creating this conference. As an Atlanta native myself, I'm so excited to see this community thriving and seeing Atlanta become a true hub for technology and innovation here. So this is really awesome to see all of you, and thank you so much for attending. So I'm Elizabeth Morrison. I work for Unstoppable Domains and Web3 partnerships, and I'm really honored to be sharing the stage with these amazing leaders as well. It's a really hot topic today, very interesting. I'm really excited to dig in here. So next to me, we have Ronin the Collector. He is head of partner strategy at Gig Labs. And we also have Matt McElroy, and he is senior director of growth and innovation at Turner Sports. So guys, I will let you go ahead and quickly introduce yourselves.
Thank you. So like she said, I'm Ronin, the Collector. How I got into Web3 and NFTs was essentially a couple of years ago through literally collecting. I've just been kind of a huge nerd my entire life and really a gamer who appreciates digital assets and can understand the value that we have placed on them in the past. So when I discovered blockchain and NFTs, it just made sense. So I got into it a couple years ago, collecting NFTs, and I did that for about a year and a half. About 6 months in, I started creating content. And so I do an NFT show every week on Wednesdays called NFT Live. And then through that, I started consulting and helping brands and celebrities and artists figure out kind of how this works, how it applies to their business, and how they can enhance their experience with their customers and their fans and things. So.
Cool, and I'm Matt McElroy. I work for Warner Brothers Discovery Sports. I have to get used to saying that. We've recently rebranded, formerly Turner Sports. A little bit of what we're working on. We have a mobile blockchain game out called Blockleet Golf. It's available in the app stores. It was one of the first mobile blockchain games that was released. We released it in October of last year. I've been on the team for a little less than 2 years. Besides the golf game, we're working on a number of other projects. And actually, the golf game was launched with Gig Labs back in 2020 was when we started that project. Just a little bit about Turner Sports for those who aren't familiar. Our consumer-facing brand is Bleacher Report. You may be familiar. We also have a number of properties on television, NBA on TNT, NHL on TNT, et cetera. And then we also power NBA Digital and NCAA Digital, helping those leagues run their digital businesses. So as part of the NBA partnership, we were party to Top Shots launching as well. So we have a number of different projects. I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to dig into these questions. So the title of this panel is Bringing Legacy Brands into Web3. That's something that is very prevalent right now that we're seeing, especially with the likes of Reddit and Starbucks and even Nike and Tiffany & Co. starting to enter Web3, which is really fascinating what they're doing. Web3 has been a sleeping giant. It's been a bit under the radar, but we're starting to see the companies take action and start developing strategies, and they're currently watching and they're figuring out how to come play with us in Web3. And so that's what we're going to dive in a bit deeper now. So to go go ahead and get started. Why should brands incorporate aspects of Web3 into their business model?
I'll start, sure. So as head of partner strategy for Gig Labs, part of my job is getting brands to understand why they should be applying the technology. And I think that we found that probably the easiest way of explaining it is to enhance the experience between them and their consumers. However, that works best for the company. It's kind of my job to help them figure that out. I do think that the most important thing about entering Web3 is making sure that whatever the activation that you do makes sense for your brand and for your business. And at Gig Labs, we really advocate for doing that at a core level, right? So rather than being, a side project or a single drop where you're throwing out a bunch of NFTs, you don't really have a purpose or a point. We really advocate for NFTs being part of the core business model, unlocking experiences and content that have to do with your core basis, right? We think that that's where the value is going to come from. In a matter of a year or two, we're going to see just about every brand take the same approach that Starbucks and Adidas and Nike have, and really integrating this technology with their core business in the same way social media has been kind of taken on as part of that. When it used to be something they just outsourced, didn't put any care into, didn't think they had to have someone on staff to do, but they've quickly realized that it's really important to have somebody authentic on that front line having those conversations. And this is very much just kind of that evolution of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hard part, is the how does it relate to your core business? Because I would argue a lot of the use cases and business cases for Web3 haven't been established yet. Like, we're still very early. It's still very much a technology. It's not always clear what sort of the business problems it's solving are. But I'm gonna take a quick macro view. I mean, I think this is not gonna be a hard sell to this group, but I'm a firm believer that Web3 will be part of the future in everything that we do. And we all spend so much time on phones and computers and in the digital world. There's no reason that those things can't have real asset value and have real sort of immutable records, and people can take them places and they be interoperable. And that's not a new concept. Like, I love telling the story of back in 2007, I was at a microtransactions conference at Stanford, and there was a company called Hot or Not. It started as, I won't go into what they started as, but they became a dating site, and they were telling a story about how they would sell virtual roses, and all it was, this is pre-blockchain, they're just pictures, and they had a white one, a yellow one, and a red one, and they were $3, $5, and $10. And they sold more of the $10 ones than they did any of the others, because online relationships are as valuable as physical relationships, and so much the way flowers transmit value in the real world, a picture transmits value in the digital world. And so I think if you can get bought into this idea that things should have value on the internet, you can start to embrace the idea that like Web3 and blockchain is the future. And so as a brand, I don't know what the use case is, given whatever your brand is. I spend time thinking about sports. I don't think about hotels or other sort of business lines. But I think it's important that you start putting your feet in the water and building and learning and understanding. It's evolving quickly, such that as these things start to come, and crystallize, and you can understand what those use cases are, that you're prepared and that you're not behind the eight ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Brands are definitely working on developing those strategies. And also it's really important to think about how to make it, not Web3 as like a product, but more so like a feature, and how it's accessible and it enhances their experience with the brand without necessarily throwing Web3 or NFTs in their face. And potentially turning people off or making them feel intimidated where they can't participate. And that's a big issue too, that brands also, it's very important for them to consider. So in what ways, in your own words, what can companies most effectively do to enter into Web3 and leverage Web3 to grow their brand?
I think it depends on what your business is. I mean, I think, first and foremost, just keep up with the trends and sort of understand and take notes from what others are doing. I think there's a lot of things, there's a lot of room for companies to do things on the side. I mean, I look at, we launched this game, Blockleet Golf. The Blockleet name is new. It's not leveraging any of our existing IP, and I often describe it as our sandbox. It's a safe space to experiment, to learn, and I think for a lot of companies, depending on how big your company is, there's always room to sort of create little side pockets, little skunkwork teams to be experimenting and breaking stuff without it disrupting the brand. But I go back to, I think the hard answer is like, depending on your brand, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's important to be experimenting and trying and learning constantly so that you can be an early adopter as these things start to come to fruition.
Yeah, I think I would add that for me, it's most important for a company to find someone who understands the space at more than just a surface level. I think like when you are someone who's currently in the space as just a collector or a trader or someone who's trying to find your way, you've probably seen a lot of different approaches. Some of them have been, like Nike, that makes sense, that enhances that experience. And then you see other brands that are doing things like Pepsi, and it's like you've got 10,000 microphones, and it doesn't really make sense. And I would probably attribute that to bad consulting. I think that it's really important to find how this makes sense for your brand. And to Elizabeth's point, it's not always in a way that's going to make the brand money directly. I really honestly feel that the way NFTs are going to be used most of the time is going to be indirectly, more for loyalty and rewards. So I think that most important, find someone who understands the space, get someone on staff who can help guide the conversation, and can also tell you when someone on the other side's, BS.
100%. To add to that, I would say for brands to have a spirit of genuine curiosity about it and not shut it out because it's new or confusing or like complicated or you're not sure how to get into it. Do your research, be curious about it, and hire people to help you through it. And so that way you don't miss the boat and you're sad in 5 or 10 years when, all these other brands are thriving with cool projects and you let fear or confusion potentially hold you back. So definitely get curious. So if there was a brand in here right now and they were thinking about getting into Web3, but they're like not super sure or confident, they're like, tell me why. Why should a brand consider entering Web3? What are some benefits for them?
I think it's better to start with for the brand, I think the conversation should start more so what's your reasoning? What's your purpose? What's your point? And then I can find your why, right? If you come and you sit down and you tell me that we just want to make money, well, we can figure out a strategy for that, right? If your brand is we want to enhance the customer experience and we want to make our rewards program actually bring positive dividends, then we can figure that out as well. So I think that when it comes to the brand, the most important thing is making sure that the model and the approach that you take is going to make a lot of sense. And that's most important. So make sure your goals are aligned with your activation.
I think that was a great answer. I don't have much to add. I think you also just need to decide, do you want to keep up with the times or be behind the times? And, and that can help decide whether you embrace it or not.
And be willing to pivot. I'm totally new to tech. I know you've been in it for a while, but I was a data analyst for a health insurance company before all this. So seeing how often our company and our partner companies and companies of the people who I've networked with, how often they pivot, and not small pivots. I've seen people totally take their idea and 180, do something completely different at the moment of getting ready to pull the trigger to launch what they originally had. So be willing to pivot when you realize that maybe you weren't on the right track or maybe you had some bad advice or whatever, because that helps a lot. Just be open to making the change when it's necessary if you want to be successful. I think a lot of people feel since they committed, they have to go through, and financially and with your relationships, I think it's better if you just make sure it's executed well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. And then, so of course, more technologies might be more inclined to embrace Web3. What do you think about non-technology focused companies and them getting involved? Do you think that most of adoption might come from those non-tech companies or more so from the technology companies?
I imagine the technology companies will be the first, but I think there's a role for Web3 with any company. I mean, a lot of Web3 is really about community. I mean, you think about it, it's decentralization, it's giving your consumers some degree of ownership or control. And I think regardless what your brand, what your company does, there's a role in which that sort of becomes part of who you are as a company and how you engage with your customers. So I think there's absolutely a role for everybody. My suspicion is that the non-tech companies will be sort of the last to the party, so to speak, but it doesn't mean that they can't, play.
Yeah, I think the main industry for a company isn't probably the best identifier. I would say like the best indicator, at least for us that we found, is the companies that are just more like forward thinking, more tech friendly, the ones that you're often finding to be the first ones to jump in, right? Like you look at social media, Nike, Adidas, like shoe companies, streetwear, right? That's one of the first things that adopted that technology. So it makes a lot of sense that you're seeing the same types of companies come into Web3, like the Bomb Squad and a Bomb Squad, and brands like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me think of Starbucks too. Historically, we don't think of Starbucks as a tech company, but they are now providing journey stamps, which are NFTs, and leveraging Polygon and to create more experiences and rewards and opportunities for their community. And so it's kind of interesting to see too, like the non-tech companies almost merging and becoming tech companies. So I feel like that's probably what we'll see a lot in our future as well.
Yeah, I think, sorry, real fast, the other thing that'll be really interesting, if everybody saw the Instagram news, that Instagram is going to start allowing for the sale of NFTs on the platform. I think a lot about, if Apple would allow, if Apple created an NFT, like a blockchain wallet, on your phone, just like the immense impact that would have at bringing sort of mass audiences to this space. And so I think it'll also be interesting as the tech companies do embrace, and certainly Meta as a company seems sort of focused on this, as they do embrace this technology, it is going to be a massive on-ramp for the next 1 million, 10 million, 100 million customers into this ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw the Instagram news. I was like, oh, I'm going to be watching this, see what kind of adoption this brings. It's going to be really fun to watch. So I work for Unstoppable Domains. We're a digital identity company and Web3 domain provider. And so since I'm in this space, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how important you think digital identity is and how traditional brands can use digital identity as they enter Web3, or if they're already currently here, how they can develop that for themselves.
I think it's as important as your IRL identity. I think for probably most of the people in here, because it seems like it's a younger crowd, right? Like you probably identify much more to the technology and the relationships that you make being real relationships versus someone who's older and says, well, is that an online relationship, or are you finding them through like online dating? It really is just identity. Right? I do think what is most important is the ownership of that identity. And we are now at a point that the technology allows for that ownership. So we need to leverage it as best as we can. And I think that there's a future where this technology gets to a point where you can control your image on the internet, right? Like if I want to take back ownership and say, no, you can't share my photos on your content, like because the content will be controlled by tokens and on the blockchain, and I'm the one who like minted that token and the original like item, eventually I will be able to pull permissions back, right? So when it comes to identity, I think it's core to this next evolution of where we're going with tech.
Yeah, I get really excited about the non-transferable NFTs and how that can power sort of online identity. I mean, you can't fake it. Like it's verifiable. And I haven't seen anyone really do a lot with it yet, but you think about like proof of attendance NFTs being non-transferable. So like literally if you weren't there, if you didn't scan the QR code in person, like you can't have that NFT. There's so many things and so much sort of like validation and authenticity that can be built around sort of some of these types of experiences using non-transferable NFTs. I haven't seen anyone do it well yet, but I think it's coming. And it becomes almost like your digital credit score because you can see someone's history and all the things they've done. And, there's a lot of potential in terms of what can be leveraged there.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's really cool. I'm sure we'll definitely see that develop, and that's something that would be really interesting and needed. And totally agree. Ownership of your digital identity is huge. So love that. All right, so we're going to make a little pivot now. We're going to talk about current adoption in Web3, and let's chat about Reddit. They're hot on the blockchain right now. They recently onboarded over 3 million users using digital collectibles. So how do you think that companies can reciprocate these onboarding performances?
I think Matt pointed out earlier is like that is the power that these massive brands and companies that have huge dedicated communities have. They literally doubled the amount of wallets in the entire NFT ecosystem in a matter of 3 months. And they did it what a lot of the internet likes to call as a Trojan horse. I bought my first Reddit. I've been on Reddit for years. So when I saw that they were doing NFTs, it made sense, right? So on July 7th, when they launched, I bought a handful of them. And I was like, this is awesome. They did this the right way. They had price points starting, I think it was like the lowest was $5. And it was like $5, $25, $50, $100 or something like that. And that's how this is going to gain adoption. It's not like $10,000, apes. They have their place, but when it comes to like how can we get as many people in as possible, we got to make it easy. We got to make it smooth. We don't talk about the weird terms and the things, right? It's just a digital collectible. This is just a collectible avatar. The way they created their ecosystem was one that makes sense. I talked earlier about doing it at the core level of your brand. They're not selling you a PFP that they're expecting you to go use on Twitter. They're selling you an avatar that is the only avatar you can use as your visual representation on their platform. So it was a very smart way of going about it. And when you talk about how do we see other brands approach it, I think we haven't seen tons of them do it because they're all really waiting to figure out how to do it the right way. Unless, they want to take a chance and see how it works, and they're that type of company, which is okay too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, all of the NFT stuff started with sort of engineers who understand decentralization and, the idea that, like, not my keys, not my crypto, sort of like, how to create a MetaMask wallet. Like, that is not how this space grows. I think those experiences where it is a truly, non-custodial, you own your own keys wallet will always need to exist for the people that really want to have that level of sort of control. But if we want to bring in the next sort of millions and millions of people into this space, it has to feel familiar. It has to be wallets created with your email address. It has to, maybe we don't even call it wallets. We certainly shouldn't call it NFTs. It's fascinating. We do a survey, or we were doing a survey regularly. We would ask people their sentiment on NFTs, and there's a not insignificant portion of the population that just thinks NFTs are the worst thing ever created, and that they're all scams, and they're not always wrong. But I think we've got to get away from calling it by the technology that it is and focus more on the user experiences. No one's like, hey, I went to that cool like React website, or I used this great JavaScript experience. Like, the technology is seamless. It's about the experience and the product that's built on top of it, and I think that's where we have to get to. And that may mean for some consumers it's a custodial wallet and it's still a username and password, but you give the power user who wants full control the ability to take it into a non-custodial wallet and to have their own seed phrase, to take it into cold storage, whatever it is they want to do. And we're going to have to meet consumers across that spectrum wherever they're comfortable. And it's just going to mean more familiar experiences that use UI and user experiences more akin to what we had in Web 2.
And part of that is you have to figure out those hurdles, right? So a good example is we did a project last year. It was the first one that I did with Gig Labs, and it was the Canelo and BJ Saunders fight. And so we did a NFT drop. They pushed it. I mean, it was the first time I've ever seen an NFT commercial, which I totally recorded from my phone because it's the first time I've ever had any of my product out there. So, but it was cool. The entire 4 hours, they kept putting up these promotions for the NFTs, and they're inviting you, and we got something upwards of, I think, 84,000 impressions on the webpage during that time, which is insane amount of people going. But I think we got 12 bids. And the reason is because once they got there, we had a really cool landing page. It looked good. The NFTs looked damn good. And we thought it was kind of a fun gamification of that experience. But once they clicked them, we were forwarding them to OpenSea. And then once you get to OpenSea, it's like, oh, now you got to sign up for an Ethereum wallet. And I'm sure half of them were like, is an Ethereum wallet, and I just wanted a collectible of Canelo, so maybe I would win some stuff if he won, right? So you realize there that people are interested in these things, and people will definitely take the action if you prompt them to do so, and there's enough of interest. But if the technological hump is too big, they will turn their phone off, go right back to what they're doing, and act like it never happened. So we really have to start breaking those barriers down.
Yeah, completely agree. The experience, making onboarding super easy, providing educational resources too, I think is super important to have like blogs or guides or how-to step-by-steps for new people to have that accessible for them. And yeah, exactly. Completely agree.
But look, there's still challenges. I mean, like we talk about like customer service in Web3. It's like, what do you do when somebody doesn't have their NFT? It's like, you can't tell them too bad. So there's still challenges that we're going to continue to have to grapple with, and it's going to take time. So it's not simple by any means.
I think we have to, one last thing. I think we have to be okay with the fact that like, it's not going to be a complete 100% fully decentralized environment. Mom and pop and uncle and grandma are not going to want any type of decentralized experience because that's just not how they work. It's hard enough for them to remember their email password, let alone, where did I put a 12 seed, fairies code. So I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, that's true. It's like being accommodating for all different people and their levels and what they're comfortable with. And even though we may not want the custodial options, there are millions of people who probably truly need that and still want to interact and play with us. And we need to be able to provide that for them.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we can't just appeal to investors. I mean, I was talking about this earlier. I think this last wave of NFTs was all about speculation. Like people were only buying them because they wanted them to go up in value. I think we have to get past that if we're going to attract other types of buyers. Like it can't just be everyone's buying things based on speculation. It's like video games has been important to us because these are assets you can play with. Like you spend money on it the way you spend on a toy because you're going to enjoy it and have fun with it, not because you're hoping it goes up in value. And so I think there was a lot of like cash grab projects. It was like very easy to launch something and just hope it goes up in value. It takes time to build games and build more interesting experiences. My hope is kind of these future waves of growth are really centered around those types of experiences and not just things that are attracting people hoping to make a quick buck.
Part of that is changing the narrative that like NFTs are inherently an investment asset, right? Like that big article a couple weeks ago came out, and that was like one of his points. And it's like, this is the crap we have to deal with, is that the technology is not that at all. An NFT is not an investment vehicle. An NFT is just a token on a blockchain, and it can do a lot of different things, most of which we haven't even discovered yet. And so we'd really have to get out of that thought process and realize that these are just assets. And with gaming, I think is a good example. We got to get, gamers are so like adverse to the tech, but that's because they think that we're coming for more of their wallet. They don't realize that like that's not where the value comes from, right? It's making a good product.
And they've seen games like Axie where they don't follow the typical pricing norm of games. Like to pay $1,500 to play a game, I mean, it could be the greatest edition of Call of Duty ever. They're not going to get a lot of people to pay $1,500 to play the game. And so again, Axie was attracting investor types, people that wanted to make money. People were not signing up for Axie because they thought it was a great game and they just wanted to have fun. And so like that's what has to change. I think the unfortunate part is because that first wave was all about speculation and asset growth, that with the crypto winter, it's like, well, NFTs are dead. No, NFTs are not dead. NFTs, for the sake of pure speculation, are in a winter. And I think we just have to sort of have nuance in terms about how we think about the technology versus the things that are being launched on it.
Excellent.
Love it. Speaking of games, I would love, I don't know if anyone's ever played Crash Bandicoot. Remember Crash Bandicoot? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Mm-hmm. I would absolutely play if I could earn some Crash tokens or something. So if anyone wants to build that, let me know. I will test it for you. And then so going back to cash grabs, so we've seen a lot of companies actually release cash grabs. And so what do you think about this impact, the negative impact it can have? Does it impact more the industry of Web3, or does it reflect worse on the Web2 brand putting out the cash grabs?
I think it absolutely hurts sort of NFTs. I mean, that's like, it's all, when people say they're scams, it's because of people have been rugged and it's all these cash grab projects that had no longevity and no one bought them. And so the whole founding team went away and the community died. And so I think in order for this to have longevity, like we need to build real projects. It can't just be cash grabs. I mean, we as Warner Brothers Discovery, like we've been very careful not to just launch NFTs to launch NFTs. Like it'd be very easy for us to just drop things that could make money, but it's going to hurt us as a brand. It's going to hurt our reputation. We'd rather create experiences where those NFTs have utility and value and have some persistence outside of speculation that might go along with them. I mean, it's why like in our games where we're building, we're not doing tokenomics, because I think tokenomics have a lot of potential pitfalls. I mean, again, you look at Axie, like the reason people make money in play to earn games is because the token goes up, but then the moment demand drops, the token falls, everyone loses money. And so, the volatility of these tokens creates a lot of risk. So not to say somebody can't figure that out, but like we've avoided it because of this. And I think your brand's reputation has a lot on the line based on how you go to market and the experiences that you're launching on this technology.
I was just trying to think of like how I could expand on it, but I think that was really well said.
Awesome. Okay, and then so Nike acquired RTFKT Artifact Studios in December, and but so far they've operated primarily independently. If you were Nike, what steps would you be taking to further embrace their brand in Web3?
Nike's doing their job. Like Nike, they're approaching the space slowly and methodically. To your point, up until recently, they have been very separate, right? But like just last week, the first round of the Artifact Nike Dunks went out, which are like the custom Nike shoes that they made with a bunch of artists in the space. And those went out. They came in Nike boxes with all the Nike branding. One side you've got the Artifact logo. The other side you've got the Nike swoosh. So they are slowly integrating it. And then if you look at the patents that Nike holds, they're going to trickle that down into a marketplace and all types of really cool stuff. They've got patents for days that have to do with NFTs and technology. So I think like that is, I wouldn't tell them to do anything different. Just keep kind of playing with it, keep doing like these little spurts and see where you go, because it's working out well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Nike's probably one of the top 5 most valuable brands in the world, and it makes a ton of money every year, and the Web3 side of it is still, it's a blip on a blip. So I think they have to be very careful about sort of how they enter the space. I think it's really smart they went and bought a company, and so they're clearly invested in it, but you just have to be careful not to disrupt the core business until it's time and mature, and you can do so.
Yeah, Nike's definitely a fun one to watch, and even more so over the coming years, and see what they do and build that little piece of Web3 into a bigger piece of their business. So in Web3, community is incredibly important. It's not going to be able to thrive and scale if you don't consider your community and care about them and think of them when you're developing your products and developing your strategies. So how do you see companies developing current systems to interact with and even reward their most passionate members?
I think like through, the traditional rewards and programs like Starbucks is doing, even if they don't currently exist, just kind of powered by Web3. And then as far as like the customer engagement, I think that is going to be one of the biggest roles to fill, right? Like, so if you're looking like, how can I get into Web3 as a profession or a job, right? Like if you know how to mod a Discord, if you know how to run a Twitter, if you know how to post on Facebook, right? Like social media and community management, I think will be synonymous here in the next couple of years, and it'll also be a position that will pay well because it's very, very important to a successful Web3 project. So I think like, and that's probably what one of the most uncomfortable things for brands is, like opening up their communication with their consumers in that way, because it's like it's more 24/7, it's more direct, you're typically not having someone higher up, right, who's being approved and everything they say being checked before they respond to someone on Discord. So it's definitely, you have to have the right staff in place and just be ready to like understand what that brings with it.
Yeah, I think what I'm most interested to see is how community evolves as more mass audiences embrace Web3. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, Discord kind of sucks. And I don't think that the next 100 million people are going to embrace it with open arms. So it's not for everybody. I think it's still a really important and critical piece of the community strategy. But I think we have to find ways to connect our fan base, connect our community, interact with them outside of just Discord. I don't know what that is yet. And I don't know if it's projects building their own environments in which they can exchange with their customers. But I think there has to be improvements because Discord's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I use it as an example because I think that it'll be an important part of the position, but I don't think it's going to be every brand's strategy, right? Like every brand's not on TikTok, but some of them are, and the ones that are and they're finding success is because it makes sense within their brand. And I think that's the most important part is like be the places where your brand naturally is anyways. You know, if you're Nike, where are Nike heads like hanging out in group chats and Facebook groups and, you know, all those types of Instagram, you know, pages and things like that. So find like where your people are hanging and just like permeate that and then have like company representation there.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, you know, for us as a sports company, so much sports dialogue happens on Twitter. Not that we've figured this out, but I think like our community strategy probably needs to lean more into Twitter than maybe like a video game would, like a pure video game. And so it is a lot about where is your fan base already, where is your community already engaging, and how do you meet them there rather than force them into something where maybe they're not comfortable or maybe they're not sort of, you know, familiar with it.
Yeah, it really does go back to defining your brand and your marketing strategy and being very intentional, and not all the platforms out there, they won't work for everyone. And so instead of being like, oh, the DGens are hanging out in Discord, I'm going to go start my brand there. Like, no, it could completely crash and burn if it's not the right fit for you. So yeah, absolutely valid. Spending time developing that brand and marketing research and your strategies and truly understanding your community and your audience is like the most crucial part in the very beginning, and it should define like your further moves. Also security, keeping security in mind, like Discord, and that can be a lot of risk for people who might be like our parents or like people who aren't super Web3 familiar, but they hop in a Discord, they're like, oh, you're sending me a link, click, all of a sudden everything is compromised. And so that's really important to keep in mind too. So also with community and through these channels and having community managers, which is a tough job, by the way, they are always on and around the world, having to pay attention nonstop. So shout out to any community managers. If you're out here, like, thank you for your work. It's so hard, not easy, and it's needed. How does this open communication to the teams of the brands and like perhaps even executives, like if you want to express a concern or something you want from the project, how can a brand manage this and provide like this open line of communication?
I think part of what I did when I first got into the space was I've always been like a community builder. So I've always done like Facebook groups and forum pages and moderating and things like that. So one of the first things I did was start a Discord and everything. And I think like what I totally lost my train of thought there for a second.
You're good.
What was the
You want me
original
to ask the question?
Yeah.
So basically with community management and having community platforms and opening the lines of the communications to teams and higher ups and even executives, like what is that like and how does that impact the community?
Yeah, so as a former community manager, I think the most important thing there is to make sure that that community manager has all the information they need to properly communicate with your consumer. And what I mean by that is if you've got a drop and something breaks, the community manager needs a direct line of communication to whoever's gonna have the information that needs to be passed along. The worst thing you can do is be silent when shit hits the fan, right? Like it's not conducive to the space. So I think like how do you give a community manager the tools for success? It's like making sure they have the information so they can communicate accurately and quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that's unique about Web3 communities is like the analogy we use is it's like a bunch of homeowners, not a bunch of renters. And, you know, I've never been on an HOA board, but I know people who have, and I've heard it's kind of miserable because owners care a lot more, right? And they're going to be more vocal and they have stake in the game. And so I think, you know, beyond the fact that even a lot of these projects have communities that in a Web2 environment they wouldn't, the fact that people are invested in your project gives them skin in the game and sort of room to voice their opinions more so than they would otherwise. And so that's good and bad. It means that people are invested, but it also means like you're going to hear about it. And so I think, you know, as a project owner, you just have to be open-minded, you have to be transparent, and you have to embrace the fact that you're going to have a lot of strong opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already briefly kind of covered this, but the term digital assets, that seems to be more favorable and accepted to the larger masses of people instead of saying NFTs. Do you think this is going to continue?
I do. Like as we build games, like secretly my hope is that somebody who publicly says, I hate NFTs will come play our game, buy an NFT, not even know they bought an NFT, realize it's an NFT, and then be like, actually, that was kind of cool. So I think absolutely we're going to move past calling the technology, and we're just going to build really cool experiences on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the biggest projects in the space, the most successful, most of them don't like reference NFTs at all. Top Shot, All Day, Reddit, right? Like that is the perfect example. Like Reddit traditionally and historically has hated NFTs. And then they all woke up in July and they had access to NFTs that made sense for them, that connected with them, that they could understand. And see the use case, and it made sense, right? So yeah, and all they did was call those digital, avatar collectibles. So I think that's very key to adoption.
Amazing. So we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to quickly run through a couple last questions. So what is one thing you'd say that companies can do as a step in the right direction of changing public perception of Web3?
I think launch projects that give users value besides the speculative asset value of the thing that they're buying. I think that's probably 90% of why NFTs have a bad rap, is because people bought things thinking they'd go up in value and they did not. So I think the more we can do to just create projects that aren't about speculation, the better perception people will have of NFTs and Web3.
Find the proper use case. Which is kind of in the same vein, but just make sure it makes sense for your business. If it's through social medias, through reward, through loyalty, through marketing, customer acquisition, just whatever makes sense for your brand and your company, so you're implementing the tech in the proper way.
All right, amazing. And then final question. So thinking of goals for future adoption and the future of Web3, how should brands be thinking about embracing Web3? And what should they be looking to acquire? Should they acquire a proven Web3 brand? Should they create their own? Or do you think there might be some sort of hybrid in the future?
Definitely do, again, just what makes the most sense. I think like for Nike, it made a lot of sense to go out and buy a company that was already doing shoes, custom shoes. They had already found an outsourced factory where they could literally make these shoes themselves. Artifact sold shoes before they had their partnership with Nike. So that made sense for them. I do think personally that every brand, every company, everyone who touches the technology is going to need some form of internal Web3 team. So even if you do something like Nike did and outsource a lot of that, you're still going to need contacts within your company that understand Web3, that are getting them the things they need, helping them be successful in what they're trying to execute on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's like a single answer to that question. It depends a lot on the brand. I think generally crawl, walk, run is not a bad thing. So that may mean up front you're outsourcing a lot of it, and then as you find product market fit and experiences that your consumers engage with, you bring more of it in-house. But I think it really just depends on how big's your company, like what are you trying to accomplish, and then you develop a path to get there.
Amazing. Any final words you want to say or about bringing brands into Web3 before we wrap?
It's a difficult task. And the more that we can get Web3 natives out there on the front lines who understand collecting, who understand the mindset of gamers, that understand how you can really get creative, the better. So, if you don't think you have a place, if you fit any of those bills, like get out there. There's a million brands that we talk to all the time that I'm like, you just need somebody who understands Web3 on your side, and then you can accomplish so much once you do that.
I'm just curious to see what people come up with. Like I use the analogy a lot of it's like when the iPhone came out, I remember there was a Grolsch beer app that everyone ran around and like you'd tip your phone and it would look like you were drinking a beer and everyone had an iPhone, thought this was like the coolest thing ever. Check out my app. And it took 10 years for Airbnb and Uber and like real businesses to be built on the back of the iPhone. And like we're at the Grolsch beer phase right now. And I'm curious to see who in this room and who elsewhere comes up with the Uber and Airbnb of Web3.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Cannot wait to see what is going to be coming in the upcoming years, especially with all the talent, even in this room, what's going to be built and created coming out of the heart of Atlanta. So it's so exciting. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ronin, so much for sharing your insights and your experience on this panel. Thank you, Web3 ATL, for providing this opportunity for us to hang out. Make sure to come chat with these guys. Have any questions about Web3 branding and building brands? These are your experts. So thank you all so much for attending.